Hey everybody, Tactic Angel here, back on the PlayStation 4, playing some World Warships. Today we're finally going to be reviewing the Tier 7 premium ship, Kriegsmarine ship Tirpitz. As usual, we will start with a bit of history. The Tirpitz was the second ship in the Bismarck class of battleships. She was laid down in 1936 and completed in 1939. Her sister ship, the Bismarck, accomplished two things that are going to be more or less integral to the fate of the Tirpitz herself. First, she sunk HMS Hood, the British battlecruiser and pride of the Royal Navy fleet. Though the Hood herself was badly in need of a refit, she was far too popular to be sent to port to actually get it. This ultimately left her vulnerable to the very sort of shot that detonated her magazine and sent her to the bottom with all hands except for 3 sailors. This was a major blow to the Royal Navy, which was, of course, the most powerful and proud navy in all the world at the time. The Bismarck would survive only another 3 days, though, before the relentless Royal Navy forced the Kriegsmarine to scuttle the ship rather than see her captured. As such, the Tirpitz was the most impressive remaining ship in the German Navy. And like anything of value, the Germans weren't too keen on committing her to excessive danger. And since the first time that the Germans sailed her out into the North Sea, the British sent King George V, the Duke of York, another King George V class battleship, the battlecruiser Renown, and aircraft carrier Victorious after her, as well as a dozen destroyers for good measure. This meant that Tirpitz spent a lot of time in Nordic fjords, where she functioned basically as a fleet in being against an Allied invasion of Norway, which Germany considered to be a possibility at the time, dissuading the Soviet fleet from trying to break out of its position in Russia, and as long as she was operational, Allied shipping to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics had to respect the space. A fleet in being is essentially a ship or a group of ships so powerful and operating out of a port of relative safety that they functionally dissuade people from operating their ships in the vicinity. Because of her relatively static station throughout the war, she was called the Lone Queen of the North. The Tirpitz partook in relatively minimal surface engagements, participating in the invasion of Norway and little else. For the rest of the war, she simply had to deal with an endless procession of aircraft set on sinking her. Some of this was out of logistical necessity, since it would have been difficult to guarantee enough fuel for the Tirpitz to be terribly effective and very mobile during the war. Of course, on the opposite side of it, the British were dead set on never sustaining another loss like the Hood, based on the amount of effort they put into sinking the Tirpitz. The Tirpitz was, after all, the heaviest battleship ever built by a European nation, weighing in at over 53,000 tons, fully loaded after her several refits and upgrades. In total, the British launched over 1,100 aircraft against the Tirpitz in several attacks, eventually resulting in her destruction after a bomb detonated partially within the ship, which blew away the side of the ship. The Tirpitz ultimately capsized, taking around half of her crew with her. In terms of how she performs in the game, I'm not sure exactly what to tell you, so I will give you 2 things that I know are true. The Tirpitz is presently a little bit more vulnerable than she's intended to be, and that in spite of this vulnerability, you can still effectively play the ship without the bug being fixed. Just be aware that you are particularly vulnerable to fire from other battleships at all ranges and against well-aimed shots by cruisers. I think this puts us all in an awkward sort of position because you don't really know, if it's worth it if you don't know what the final state of the ship is ultimately going to be, because if she performs relatively well, even in a broken state, that would mean if you ran a game company, you wouldn't fix it quite so hard, right? And ultimately, I can't tell you how much more survivable the ship is going to be under ideal or normal circumstances. Simply put, I don't know. So as we start to look at the stats, we'll start with survivability, which is, of course, what I've already been talking about. If you want to look at the base stat, it says 83, which puts it right in between the Vanguard or Iowa for completely different reasons, and the Amagi. The armor is ultimately closest to the Vanguard, which has a little less all or nothing than the Iowa. For hit points, it has 69,300. This is the second lowest currently, next to the Amagi. The survivability of this ship comes, in theory, from your turtleback armor, which is intended to prevent the ship from taking shots into its critical components. However, if the ship is currently sitting too high in the water, you can effectively get shots in under the turtleback, which means that you're being hit below its main belt of armor protection, and you're going to get citadeled more often than you ought to be. Where artillery is concerned, the Tirpitz lands dead last in terms of its main battery size, with only 8 380mm guns mounted in 4 turrets. It's probably fairly close to the bottom also in terms of penetrative power and damage. However, it has the second quickest reloading guns, which partially makes up for that. Ultimately, the Tirpitz does have a pretty good artillery rating, and that is due to its above average secondary rate of fire and range. The main battery can be fairly punchy at short range, but always keep in mind that the Tirpitz penetration is fairly low, so you are more likely to bounce shells than you expect, and that penetrative power does fall off relatively quickly. Next, we'll look at torpedoes. This is not something we normally talk about on battleships, but the Tirpitz does have a pair of quadruple torpedo launchers, one on each side. They shoot out to 6 kilometers. Torpedoes have a base speed of 64 knots, so they're not excessively slow, and if you want to play the Tirpitz effectively, I would try to work these into your strategy. As for AA defense, you are currently the worst Tier 7 battleship in the game, but that's just another reason to be happy that this stat doesn't mean anything right now. On the other hand, with a maneuverability rating of 50, you are the best rated battleship in terms of maneuverability at Tier 7. Finally, in terms of concealment, you're a battleship, so you're probably going to get spotted from forever away. In terms of battleships, you are currently the second stealthiest of all if somebody were to bother to mount camouflage on a Vanguard. Otherwise, you are a battleship that's wearing camouflage, and my guess is a lot of battleships that you're going to see at Tier 7 are not going to be bothering with camo, at least for the concealment factor. Overall, this gives me the feeling that the Tirpitz is very much like a stronger, tougher big brother to the Scharnhorst or Gneisenau, but the Tirpitz also likes to drink more than its siblings. Naturally, because of her immense mass, she is not as nimble in the water as either of those battlecruisers. Finally, we come to some gameplay. We're going to be on Shards. My commander for this is Ciliax, partially because I don't have Hipper, but also because I like to have this extra heal, and also because of Porcupine. Now we start the game by not paying a whole lot of attention, but eventually I wake up, start to take stock of who's around me. Of course, I'm in the dreaded middle spawn position, but the middle spawn is really right where I want to be, particularly with the 2 ships that I have around me. A Benson is a great knife fighter, and the Gneisenau can definitely get in there and brawl as well. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. We're going to want to go up to B and actually take it, because there's almost no chance they have a better pair of ships to do it, or trio of ships anyway. That said, we are distracted by this Amagi that is giving me a conspicuously large amount of real estate to shoot. I know I said that the guns on this ship are relatively small and not super punchy. That is not to say that you cannot hit a broadside target, but once they start angling, you're going to find it increasingly difficult to actually do that. We're taking aim on this Moss. We see that he's shot both sets of his torpedoes, but he's still in I want to try to defeat a Benson mode. So he comes around this corner, not really paying attention to me. It doesn't really hurt him so far because, of course, Tactic Angel German battleship accuracy. We do launch our torpedoes. You saw there, they have a really nice arc, and we do manage to finish him off. That Amagi is still broadside. We're going to see if we can't tag him again. And we do. And get a couple more decent hits in there. At this point, I think I'm sailing towards a Colorado, which I am happy to do. because I will definitely be able to beat a Colorado, but it looks like there's a Błyskawica up there, and I'm not sure that I want to take both of them on, or a destroyer in close range if I have an option. We put some more shells in there. Kind of throughout the entire game, you're going to notice that I am not. I'm leading my targets a little bit too much because I expect them to be at a speed that they're clearly not. We put some more shells out there on that Amagi. We're going to turn in. Oh my! Apparently they were pretty okay. I think somebody else probably hit him in the meantime, but we managed to secure a kill. For a second, I think I'm going to go get that Błyskawica, but I have second thoughts. We're going to go ahead and get around this island. We do have enough maneuverability to be able to pull this kind of turn off and then come out on the far side of that middle island. And that'll hopefully give us just enough range to safely engage these other targets. I am going to realize here in a second, I am sailing towards another destroyer to try to get away from the first destroyer. That said, that Benson looks like he's got a whole lot of problems, so we're going to help with that. I unload my AP. I'm loading HE because I want to make sure to damage these guys' modules, and usually I seem to come away with better numbers rather than getting a whole bunch of overpens. We put some more shells out there. Managed to hit the Benson once. Didn't exactly walk away with a lot of damage, but he's finished off by someone else on my team. Now comes a lot of indecision as I try to figure out what in the world I want to do. Now, I kind of feel like this Colorado is going to eventually sail around this island, and I'm going to be fairly convinced of this for a long time. And while we're watching me make bad decisions, I'm going to hit a little bit on generally how I think that you should be playing the Tirpitz. Because particularly nowadays, a lot of games are played where people just sit in the back and try to use their battleships as a sniper. And you're not going to have good luck playing the Tirpitz like that. You need to really get in there. You want to be pushing for your team. You're going to be able to defeat a lot of the things that are going to be pushing back against you. So, just like in the Scharnhorst, which we're moving over towards two Scharnhorsts, you always want to be kind of moving forward, getting yourself in a better position to make your German accuracy work. Certainly, we see there that I am not aiming correctly. I am leading the target a little bit too much, but whatever. We still hit him. We damaged him. We're doing fine. We repeat the same thing. Not really going to be a big issue because he's going to get finished off by the Hipper up there. Unfortunately, the Hipper is not going to last too terribly long against two battleships at that range. I'm going to turn in towards the Scharnhorst, driving in between the two sets of torpedoes. I think that means that both of the Scharnhorsts launched their torpedoes that would have been facing me, so I'm not too worried that this Scharnhorst is going to shoot me with torpedoes, and I make that even less likely as I take out his torpedo launcher, which will at least reset his cooldown. I'm going to try to lead this guy a little bit, expecting him to turn in. He does, but I underestimate just how nimble he is. Now I am a little worried that I'm going to get torpedoed, so I'm going to turn in towards him. I'm not really interested in ramming him. We do manage to dodge those torpedoes. and somebody else, actually another Tirpitz, finishes him off. Now we're pretty sure the game is won, but there is one more ship out there. It is, of course, the Błyskawica, which is haunting my dreams since the beginning of the match. We unload our salvo of AP, and now we are loading in HE because we are going to go hunt this guy. Now, he probably does have torpedoes, but we do see that he's already launched them, so this is not nearly as suicidal as it might look. He only has the 2 torpedo launchers. We've got our spotter plane in the air. With HE, we managed to do a fair bit of damage. He disappears again, so I decide to put a blind shot out there. Looks like we missed, but you can see the secondaries on this. They chew him up at the very end, earning us a close quarters award. So naturally, that was a decent representation of what you might expect in a decent Tirpitz game. You do want to get in there close. Don't hang in the back because you'll be taking away your own advantage in terms of turtleback armor and the fact that you have torpedoes. If you want this ship, you want to play aggressively, just like the other Tirpitz on my team and just like the Scharnhorsts on the enemy team. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one.